Welcome everyone back to the podcast. Thank you so much. This is episode 5 with my friend Barry Crushell. He is a lawyer. He is a soon-to-be author. He's currently working on a PhD, which is very impressive. He is an ex-Army officer, and today we had a great chat talking about our experiences in Jiu-Jitsu, combat sports, and our experience in the armed services. So check it out. But before I go, because I always forget at the end, I want to give a shout out to our number one sponsor, Locomotiva BJJ. They're a wonderful school academy to go to, located in Milltown, headed by the great and powerful Edson Jr., a brown belt under John Kavanaugh out of SBGHQ. So if you're looking for a new gym, give them a shout. At very least, do me a favor, go into Instagram and search for Locomotiva_Jiu-Jitsu and give them a follow. Our other sponsor, myself, Wolverine Fightwear. Check us out. We're the finest of sports-related gear and clothing. New stuff coming out regularly. So with that, let's get into it.
Depends. Yeah. Are we live now?
Yeah, I'll probably edit this part out. But yeah, all right. Welcome everybody back to the podcast. I have here my special guest, Mr. Barry Crushell. Is it Crushell?
It's crucial that it's crucial.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's crucial, Crushell. Sometimes I could be crucial.
Yeah.
Look, I've been called worse.
Well, my real first name, Juan. I don't know what it is about this country, but people can't seem to understand it.
Yeah.
I was in the hospital once, and I was waiting. I was in the waiting room there for over an hour. And then finally, I got annoyed, and I went up to the nurse, and I'm like, hey, like, what's going on here? Like, I've been here forever. You know, people are coming and going. You know, are you gonna call me or what's going on? And then they're like, what's your name? I said Juan. I said Juan, and they're like, how do you spell that? And I'm like, Juan. And they're like, oh, Joanne. No, it's not Joanne. As soon as I said that, I'm like, I heard them.
Yeah.
They've been calling Joanne.
Yeah.
I'm like, gosh, you
The
jerks.
thing is that when I first met you, then you said your first name properly was Juan.
Yeah.
I thought you said Juan. And then I said, man, this guy could be half Asian. I don't think I ever told you that. I thought your first name was Juan, W-O-N,
Yeah.
like the Asian name. And I thought to myself, okay, he's got sallow skin. He's got some, dark eyes and whatnot. So potentially, maybe he's mixed race. But then I realized you were John. But it's just, with the H. But it's the same also with the, with the Brazilians, with the or. I'm able to get into it later. But
The worst part about it was the woman who I spoke to. She was Filipino.
Yeah.
So a lot of Spanish names would be common in the Philippines.
Of course.
So I kind of expected her to know it,
Yeah.
And so.
But it could be worse. You could be Brazilian with an or name like Roger, but everyone calling, but your real name is Hodger.
Yeah.
So now when I ever meet an Irish guy with a first name beginning with or who does jiu-jitsu, I just call him the H. So if you're Hodger or you're Hitchard or anything like that, Richard becomes Hitchard. So that's just one of my little games with these people.
That's funny.
Cool.
That's funny. All right, well here, so you and I train together at SBG, HQ, and Inchcore. Honestly, this is one question about, I like to ask anyone that I train with, but what is it that brought you to Jiu-Jitsu or martial arts in general?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's kind of funny, when I was growing up, I used to play some sports, usual Irish kid. You're playing football, you're playing Gaelic football. I didn't play hurling because when I played it once, I got a whack across the face. And I was like, nope, that's enough for me. But
I've heard that story before from several people.
I was like, no, this was pre-helmet days, 1980 safeties. So I was an army officer for years. And when I left, I joined a large corporate law firm. And I'm going to be honest, I found myself, it was a little bit like Fight Club. I found myself going to work in the day and coming home at night and just having this yearning for something a little bit more.
Yeah.
I kind of needed to just release a little bit of angst. Sounds crazy, but anger, aggression, there was testosterone building up. I felt very confined. During my time in the military, everything was very physical. You know, you're going for runs on a daily basis, you're going to the gym, you're out there on long range exercises, on patrols and whatnot. And I was kind of looking for a replacement for that. And I first started out, when I was a kid, I did Kempo as a kid for a couple of months. But the guy who would give me a lift, he was a couple of years older than me, he stopped. When he stopped...
So subsequently you had to stop as well.
I had to stop as well. So I still know my moves from that, my kata. So, but then after that, there was a gym near my workplace. It was called Kokoro MMA. I don't think they exist anymore, but it's in a place called Gaelic Street near Crow Park.
Okay.
So it was very different from being in a large corporate law firm where you have a huge boardroom and people are serving you coffee and you've got people literally flying in on, private planes for board meetings on a quarterly basis. And then you're packing up on a Friday evening and you're going down to train in this place called Kokoro. And they had some karate lessons there early on. And so I just said, let's try this out. It was full contact karate and I enjoyed it. But what would happen is the Kokoro guys themselves, who are proper, this was a pure MMA gym, really raw. They would start cross training. So on a Friday evening, you would have cross training between the karate guys, the Kokoro guys. And then
when was this? Like what?
This would have been 2005, sorry, 2015.
Yeah, okay.
2014, 2015.
That's about the time when people really started doing that.
This was when MMA was just starting to take off. And this was when, I remember the first time I met Conor McGregor, it was on the street. Yeah. And I saw him, he was going in to get some runners or shoes in a shop in Dublin. And he was being left alone. And I turned to him and I was like, this is that up and coming MMA guy. So I was like, hey, Conor, got the picture taken. And the next time that I met him would have been rolling in SBG. But to cut a very long story short, Kokoro was raw. Okay. And on Friday evenings, we'd have sparring sessions with guys coming from Bridgestone, Muay Thai, karate, other karate clubs. It was full contact. And that's where I was introduced a little bit into grappling. But it was full contact, and I was going into work on Monday morning with black eyes, and I would have to pretend it was rugby training.
Oh, man, yeah.
Because that was sort of deemed socially acceptable. I was rugby training. But after a while, I just said to myself, you know what, I need to get a balance here. That's when I found SBG, which was on the Long Mile Road at the time. Yeah. The yellow mats. I wasn't old school. I can't say I was there before the wave really took off. But I was there just as the wave was coming up, and I started off mainly doing Muay Thai in the morning times, 2 or 3 mornings a week, and really enjoyed it, and then sort of just evolved from there, very slowly evolved.
So how many years has that been? When did you...
2015, so I suppose, that's a long time ago, but the problem here is that when people say, how long have you been training? Like, we know of guys who we train with who are training a year, but doing it twice a day.
Yeah, that's a different level.
That's a different level. So when people say, how long are you training? And then I'm close to a decade. Yeah, there's been a consistency there. It's been maybe balancing out. It's been 2 sessions, maybe 3 sessions a week if it's good. Sometimes skipping weeks on end. But I've always been consistent. I'm probably the ideal member for a guy like John Kavanagh, because I pay every month by direct debit and I barely turn up as often as some of the other guys. And that's what you want. That's your ideal. The guy who's turning up 2 or 3 times a day, he's wearing the mat down. There's been very little wear and tear coming from me.
They say that the likes of these gyms like Fly Fit and these kind of 24-hour what do you want to call it? Like generic, like fast food.
The commercial gyms.
Yeah, the commercial gyms. They have an occupancy. They have a membership limit of 4 or 5 times what they could actually take, because they know
100%
certain people will just pay and not come in, and then they make it difficult to cancel as well.
Yeah.
So
because
the SPG's not like that.
SPG's been great. I mean, I've been a member there for for a long time now, and on occasion when I've had to suspend membership or whatnot, there's been just sort of like no issues. They might ask the question, do you mind us asking why? And I say, oh, I'm sick and I've been told that I won't not. But yeah, those sort of gyms, because it's interesting, when you go to most gyms, there's probably always a core element, whether it's one of these Fly Fits or, you know, one of these other commercial gyms, you'll see the same people again and again. And then occasionally you'll see random faces and go, I kind of recognize that person. They might have been members for 10 years. I'm kind of that guy.
Yeah.
One of those guys in SBG. Everybody kind of might say, I recognize who he is. But then I get to know other guys there as well. And the interesting thing is it's a great community. People end up knowing a little bit about you. And then what actually happens, what I've found, is I've gotten to know some guys better off the mat than on it. Particularly when they've had problems or issues or whatnot. And they've said, hey, Barry, can I speak to you a moment about this or that or whatever? Yeah. So that's kind of when you get to know guys. But no, yeah, I've been there nearly 10 years and it's been great. It's been great.
Yeah, the same. I'm going on 3 years, I think, this summer. Yeah. And yeah, it's fantastic.
But you started on the Wim to Warrior.
Yes, I did.
And you know, I think that's a great
I think it's
foundation.
A perfect for anyone who is really apprehensive about you know, joining a gym and like they just don't know. Like for me, years ago, in my early 20s, I went to a jiu-jitsu gym, and it wasn't much of a. I didn't get a very good reception. A lot of there were other there's other reasons that kind of dictate exactly why, but like it didn't get a good reception, so I kind of left there, and I'm like, you know, maybe it's not for me. And you know, because I kind of had that kind of experience, I was always really nervous about going to another gym to just to try and experience it. And the Wimp or the Train Alta now, I think it's perfect because you're going into it with, you know, 80% or more of the people who are doing it have never done any kind of martial arts. We're all learning together.
Yeah, and it covers all the great fundamentals. It covers all of the foundations. I mean, you start, like what happens if you're in martial arts for a long period of time, you begin to underestimate actually how much training and how different you are from any other person who isn't doing martial arts. So you look at somebody who goes in day one and doesn't know the difference between a jab and a cross. Yeah. And then at the end, they've gone from learning a jab and a cross through to a single or a double leg takedown, through then to a submission. I mean, that flow, I mean, that's phenomenal. And so, I mean, it wasn't available when I started. One of the great things about it, I think, as well, is that you have to, like, if you commit to it, you can't just pick and choose when you're going to turn up. Yeah. Like, you're there, I used to see the guys 6 a.m., 5:30, 6:30, whatever. I think even now they've got 2 sessions in the mornings. I mean, you also get to know a group. Yeah. So you guys kind of, it's almost like a class that graduates together.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? It's, speaking to another mutual friend of ours, he had said that, like, because we're all in the military, so it has that that element of doing something difficult, not like physically, or doing something physically difficult with a group of other people.
100%.
And then like you're all kind of suffering together. I don't know what it is about like that suffering in a group, but it really does. It
brings people together.
Absolutely, it does. You know, like there's a lot less. You're not complaining about, you know, silly things. You know, like suddenly you know, your coffee not being as hot as
100%.
You know what I mean, or whatever. Like that stuff is. Well, it's not an issue anymore.
Well, interestingly, it's only my first time thinking about this now. I was out for dinner last night. We were with some friends, and we were speaking about actually friendships and people exposing their vulnerabilities. Yeah. You know, if you meet someone and they've got their guard up. I'm talking about, you know, they're not telling you much about themselves. They don't really. Everything's always great. There's never any problems or whatnot. It's very hard for you to build a bond with that person. But I suppose when you think about it, when people are down and they're starting a journey like, you know, the Winter Warrior was, or Trialta now, you are exposing your vulnerabilities without even articulating it.
Absolutely.
You know, you're kind of there saying, hey, I don't have good lungs. I don't have a good heart. I'm out of shape. I'm uncoordinated. You know, all of those different things. And everybody gets to know it, you know, of each other. And I think when you expose your vulnerabilities like that and you go through a shared experience, it certainly brings people together. And that was probably one of the reasons why I enjoyed it, because I suppose since leaving, the military, I didn't have a group like that. And when we just spoke about, you can go to a commercial gym, FlyFit, please don't sue us. We're not denigrating your product here. But when you go to a FlyFit, it's great to be there, but it's not
the same. It's not a group.
Yeah, it's not a group. It's not a club. It's not a esprit de corps.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I think you get in most martial arts gyms, and then it varies between gym to gym. And I know that certain gyms have different vibes. And actually, one of the good things about SBG is that there's nearly a place for everybody.
Yeah.
Like if you're the 9-to-5 worker, like most of us are, you can always find, where do I fit in here?
Yeah.
If you're the 18-year-old who wants to become a pro MMA fighter, you'll certainly find your like, what's the phrase? Water always finds its level.
Yeah, exactly.
We're always trying to level up, but anyway.
So you've been training now for a little over a decade.
Yeah.
Or about a decade now.
Yeah.
How do you feel that? Do you take your training like mentally? Does that help you throughout your day, like in your normal day job?
Yeah, 100%. I suppose it's very interesting because I think training in the martial arts does give you a degree of self-confidence.
Absolutely, it does.
It does give you a degree of self-confidence. And again, I don't want to overestimate my own abilities.
Yeah.
I certainly don't. But one of the interesting things, I suppose, this is a strange thing I never really talk about, but when most people see me in my day job in a suit and tie, there's a certain perception, and we spoke about this earlier ourselves, there's a certain perception. And it gives me a confidence knowing that to a degree you could hold your own.
Yeah.
Okay? But beyond that, I think that's a confidence that nearly everybody should have, like particularly young men, but also, young women as well. I mean, I'm the father to a daughter, so I would love her when she grows up, to have a sense of security in and of herself. And I think that's important. But for me, I suppose in terms of my day to day, it's actually, I work very hard. I've got a lot on my plate. I'm also supposed to be finishing off a doctorate. I'm supposed to be writing a book.
You're doing a doctorate?
Yeah, I'm doing a doctorate, yeah.
We're going to come back to that.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be writing a book as well. And I've just also set up my own business a couple of years ago. And I've got, I'm busy. What tends to happen for me is it's very easy for me in my head. And Gustavo, our coach, our BJJ coach, if you're watching this is what happens. Is I look at my diary, something pops up and I say, you know what? Friday's free, I'll train twice on Friday. I won't go today, I'll train twice on Friday. That doesn't happen. And when I leave my training go for a long time, what tends to happen is that release that I get from training, it builds up. It physically builds up inside me. Like when you're getting choked out,
Never happens to me.
Never happens to you whatsoever. But, for those of you who don't know, there is a gorilla we train with called Andy. He knows who he is. When he's on top of you, and he is just about to, just through pure brute force, ignorance, and some technique, he's about to, Americana you or something like that. You're worrying about clients, about bills, about everything else. That goes out the window. So for me, it's actually quite meditative.
Absolutely.
That you're there and you're focused on one thing only, and everything else goes out the window. Because I wake up in the morning time and go to bed at night, probably overthinking about certain things. I'm not as bad as a lot of other people have it, but yeah, certainly to an extent. I'm always thinking in the future. I'm always thinking about
Same.
What do I need to do this week, next week? What's coming up this month? What about, the year's nearly finished. I mean, we're nearly into June now.
Yeah.
And I still feel as if I've got time to start my New Year's goals. Yeah, I'm like, no, this is my year for X, Y, and Z. But when I'm training, all of that disappears. And so for me, I've kind of come to an acceptance that I need to do it. I need to do it because it's going to help me in other areas so that I'm a better person for the people who are around me, because I haven't got all this pent up and built up energy. And I know there's other people who get that from different outlets. Certainly you can get it from drugs and alcohol and that sort of stuff, and people have done that. But other people can get it from different sports. But for me, just that intense physicality, the fact that you are nominally in harm's way if you're not focused on what you're doing.
Absolutely.
That means that you can't be focused on anything else, and that's a great release from everything else that's going on in your day.
Even just for that hour, 45 minutes a day where you can't focus on the other stuff.
100%.
It's nice to have that time to not have that weight on you.
100%.
You know what I mean? And like that short break makes it easier until your next break.
100%. And so, I mean, for me, you know, as I mentioned, I set up my own business a couple of years ago. And then you're trying to work on that and build it and build it and build it. And everything else gets put to the side for a while. But I think I have come to a point, or I thought I did, at the start of, actually, was it this year or last year? When I was like, okay, there's no point in me having autonomy if I can't do the things that I want to do. And it's very easy to let your training slip. And I do train, I mean, generally, yeah.
You train at home. You have
I train at
home gym there. I saw your dummy that you have.
Yeah. So I have. I'm very lucky with that.
Yeah.
So I have a little cabin at the back of the house, and I do have it. I have a matted area. I've got a row machine. I've got some weights. I've got a 7 foot, 40 kg Muay Thai bag. So that's great. And I'll always try to get 20 minutes in.
Yeah.
But it's never the same. The dummy is never the same as Andy.
It's just something about even like that group of people, and then even if it's like a small class, 4 or 5 people, it's still, there's still something about having that kind of group.
And sometimes that's even better. I mean, a lot of people don't notice, but last year our coach is Gustavo. The BJJ classes started again, and at one point a lot of people don't know, I was the first one to turn up. And next thing, he was there. He was a purple belt at the time. He went from purple to brown to black in the space of a year, which is phenomenal. But I was one of the first ones to turn up, and it was just me and him. And I was like, oh no. Oh my God, no. The focus is on me. There's going to be nobody else to train with. Is anybody going to turn up? But obviously now he's built something really, really strong there.
Absolutely. That's good. And I think on a regular basis there's at least a dozen.
At least a dozen, yeah. That's one of the... generally speaking, you'll find the time if it's a priority for you.
Absolutely.
Now I need to remind myself of that a bit.
Yeah.
But what about you? I mean, how do you find your challenges in terms of getting to training? What are some of the impediments that you've had?
Yeah. So mostly right now, I have I say newborn. She's 7 months old now.
Yeah.
So it's difficult.
Yeah.
So I find I like training as early as possible. So the morning classes really suit me.
Yeah.
But now with the baby and just kind of her sleep schedule, those are a bit difficult.
Yeah.
And then I have a 4-year-old as well, and she needs to go to creche.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't always work out.
Yeah.
And I find that the middle of the day or in the evenings, those tend to work out a bit better.
Yeah. Well, it's very hard. It's very hard if you've got a family.
Yeah, it's especially with a newborn, because their schedules, it's constantly changing as they're getting older.
Yeah.
And so as soon as you have something set, it changes.
100%.
And then as soon as you feel like all right, everything's normal now, back to normal, it's done.
And that's even the same for me, because even with our baby, her routine was changing. So in my head, I was like, okay, these lunchtime classes are going to be perfect. And then next thing, then she's like, her nap time changes, and you're like, okay, what are my responsibilities, and how does that fit in? So it can be difficult, but I think even parents need to give each other time away from being parents as well, and from each other. And I think that's important, and I think it's just a question of prioritizing. But okay, so you served in the military.
Yes.
Previously, yeah. What service were you in?
I was in the U.S. Air Force.
Okay.
I was in there about 4 years altogether.
Yeah.
2 years in Germany, and then 2 years in this tiny little island in Guam, or called Guam in the middle of the Pacific.
Yeah.
It was fun. I did enjoy it. I didn't necessarily like the kind of the lifestyle.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the kind of the camaraderie that you had with the other people, or the people that I served with. But like my my coworkers.
Yeah.
I say I didn't like the lifestyle because like. The Air Force, it's weird. Like we get picked on in the States by the other branches, rightfully so.
Yeah.
And at the time that I was I got in kind of a weird time because things were kind of transitioning. So we had there was what was called like the old Air Force and kind of the new Air Force. I was right at the transition of those two.
Yeah.
Where the old Air Force was turning into the new, and then. So like my first duty station, like my first 6 months, is what I would consider kind of like old Air Force.
Yeah.
So things were a lot different. Things were a bit more relaxed.
Yeah.
Things were not taken so seriously. Like the jokes about the Air Force that the other branches would give us. We kind of like it's true. It is easier over here. It is nicer over here.
Yeah.
And. Then the new Air Force started, and then we got new leadership, new like officers at like command level and up. And what they were trying to do was change things from. They wanted us to have more of this like warrior aspect, which was completely undeserved because like I hadn't touched a gun since basic training, and I had 100 rounds, and that was it.
Wow.
And then that's the entirety of my weapons training. Everything else that I have is all on my own, all done as a civilian.
Who was the president of the States when you joined?
I almost said Bush, but no, it was President Obama.
Okay. And were you there? Was he the president throughout this transition?
For the whole time.
Because to me, it would always be interesting, like what would the tone be like under different presidents? Because obviously, when Trump, the impression that I get is the military were very pro-Trump, and he seemed to be very pro-military. I'm not too sure.
I don't know. A lot of the people that I know, like they would. I don't know. I'd say it's just like anywhere. It's like I say 50-50. You have your people who are diehard one way or the other, and then you have your people in the middle that are just kind of
the silent majority.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the people who, this is my own personal opinion, the people who would say the military is for Trump, they were just kind of the loud ones, the ones who were just kind of making the most noise. Now, I don't necessarily know that that's true, but I met a lot of people who, were fans of Obama, who were, and at the time, I wasn't, given the luxury of being able to look back on things, I think my tone is probably maybe a little bit off. But yeah, no, it's like I said, it's probably about 50-50 in reality.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, you have that silent majority in the middle that don't really kind of give their opinion one way or the other.
Yeah. Now, that's interesting because the last law firm I worked for was a US law firm.
Yeah. I remember you telling me that.
Yeah. So I founded their Dublin and London office, and they were quite conservative. It was founded by two military veterans.
Okay.
And so I remember when they came over here and they were looking to launch into Ireland, they'd found somebody who was a lawyer but also ex-military, and they were like, this guy's going to get it, because they had SOPs, like they had standard operating procedures for everything. And so that was really great. But I remember I went over for some induction training for 2 or 3 weeks, and really just to sort of see what was happening. Now, they were headquartered up in Albany, so it wasn't in New York. So they had a Manhattan office, which was phenomenal, and then we went up to Albany. But while I was up there, one of the weekends, they knew I would have been pretty bored. There wasn't much to do, so they brought me out to the gun range. So it really felt, and as we got out to the gun range, I could see all the Trump flags flying, and I was like, it was just really surreal. So and I also had one of my best friends. He was I used to call him a pilot, and he would say, no, I'm a naval aviator.
Jeez.
And I'm like, come on, man, it's the same thing. But even same thing here now in Ireland, one of my best friends, if we ever use the word plane, he'll say aircraft. Aeroplane. No, listen, mate, you know what it is. It's a Ryanair plane. It's landed in Dublin Airport. It doesn't need to. It's late. You don't need to be worried about what it's called.
You're too tired for this. Calm down.
Yeah. Did you get any exposure to martial arts in the military, or where did it come from?
No, I didn't. So pretty much my entire exposure is from about almost 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So I did the Winter Warrior at the time, train on to now, and that's the entirety of it. And so the thing that really drew me into it is, like I said earlier, kind of like that suffering as a group. But the only other time where I have experienced that type of relationship with other people that I necessarily didn't know or wasn't close to was in the military.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, I was in the Air Force. We didn't do anything crazy, but we still had to deal with the same, shitty leadership as every other branch. The power hungry, 01. The lieutenant who, or in my case, it was a captain. We still had to deal with that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And so we kind of had to suffer through that together. Yeah. And I remember leaving the military and then realizing just how different it was from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Military really idiot-proofs a lot of things. Like you said, SOPs.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that, and it's because they don't want a moron to, in my experience, it's because they don't want someone to ruin a very simple procedure.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the first T-shirt that I only thing I bought from Wolverine before was aim front. I think was the T-shirt.
Front towards enemy.
Front towards enemy, and that's probably in relation to like a straw or a rocket launcher, and you're thinking to yourself, if somebody's about to fire this thing and they don't know that
it goes that way, there's some trouble. Yeah.
But it's very interesting because when you talk about that, about something being idiot proof, just the other day, on SOPs, just the other day, we had a situation whereby a client of ours, and for those who don't know, at this stage you might have guessed I'm a lawyer, but a client of ours didn't turn up for her hearing.
Uh-oh.
And we had said previously that we would seek a postponement of the hearing date.
Yeah.
But it wasn't granted. And I was acting under an assumption that she was informed it hadn't been granted. The invite was still in the diary. Nothing had changed. Mm-hmm. So we were like, why wouldn't she turn up? So when...
Or at least query it.
At least query it, yeah. So then the next thing I was like, okay, how can we avoid this situation again? What do we need to do? What are some of the problems that are coming up in relation to pre-hearing issues? And so I said, right, instead of having our meeting with the barrister who would argue the case 3 or 4 weeks before, let's do it 7 days beforehand, so that we know at that point exactly, that the case is going to go ahead, that we filed our submission, that we have the respondent submission, all these sort of things. And build it into our SOP so that when I have my instructions, when an email goes out from me, which is all template, it's literally run like that military sort of sense. All you need to do is follow these instructions.
Yes.
Because when the next person comes along, because my staff won't always be there, but when they come along again and somebody replaces legal executive or secretary or whatnot, that they're literally following a system.
Yeah. Protocol
and that's going to work. Yeah. If only you could get something similar in like jiu-jitsu or martial arts. Now I know the Gracies have tried it. Gracie University, they tried to have everything on a curriculum. But I just think in terms of there's no SOPs for fighting. And actually interesting, I know we're speaking here now, but even the evolution of it, as we're recording this last night, Cron Gracie was fighting in UFC, and
yes.
Spoiler alert at this point, he lost, but he was butt scooting. You know what I mean? And he was pulling guard. He was literally pulling guard in an MMA fight.
I saw clips on that.
Yeah, and they were talking about how different it is, how it's an old school mentality to a new world of fighting. And
I know it's big, because I'm big on jiu-jitsu, but when I was doing the MMA, I went from MMA to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And there is a transition because they're not the same.
Yeah.
And they're similar for sure, but they are not the same. And you have to make a switch like in your head, and you have
Yeah.
to like switch like onto jiu-jitsu or onto MMA, because there are differences in the pair that if you don't, like, you're going to get yourself in a bad situation.
Well, that's one of the things that I always kind of wonder. I mean, you do have certain jiu-jitsu practitioners who have this belief that it directly translates to street self-defense.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you know, I mean, there are certain things there. I mean, if you were to strip it back, I mean, if you were to look at, I read Hickson Gracie's book, Breed, last year. And they used to go, you know, to different gyms, to the beach, to different places to fight.
Yeah.
And they would use jiu-jitsu there. But it was a very different form of jiu-jitsu. You know, it was a very different form of jiu-jitsu whereby, you know, what was working, it was actually probably more akin to MMA jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. What was working was things that were very simple, very basic, but done at a very advanced level with the threat of strikes.
Yes.
And so for me, that's one of the reasons why I do like SBG, and I do try to incorporate some striking classes every now and then, some wrestling classes or MMA classes. It's just to keep that sense of realism. That, okay, because I think you could be in, and this is no disrespect to any purist jiu-jitsu practitioners, because a lot of people do it for the sport, but you could get it, you know, very badly wrong if you think you can rely upon it alone. And I still think that debate...
I like, is it Jocko? Jocko,
Yeah.
likes his interpretation is that like knowing jiu-jitsu is, I'm paraphrasing and I'm also probably screwing it up, but basically it's like, you know, if we're going to have a fight, or if we're on the street and, you know, you're kind of coming at me, this, you know, I can run away. You know, like we don't have, like, so I don't need to know how to strike, I don't need to know how to box, I don't need to know how to kick, because, you know, I can run away. And where the difference changes it's when you put your hand on me and I can no longer get away. That's where the kind of the jiu-jitsu comes in. Yeah. And honestly, like that, you know, if you have hands on each other, then, you know, you're inside striking range, really. So then, you know, that's when jiu-jitsu takes it, 100% to the ground.
And they say only 1% of the world is, or less, is training. Like 1% of 1% or something. So the chances of coming across somebody like that. And I do like that approach, because I think it's very easy for us as guys to...
The right approach, in my opinion, and especially on the street, is always to run away.
Yeah.
Because, like, you don't know... Like, this other guy, like, he could have some sort of underlying issue, and then, like, you know, say you do strike him and he hits the ground, or like you...
That's a big issue.
Like, and he dies, or he ends up, like, seriously injured.
That's a big issue. And so I suppose in terms of revealing a little bit here, I mean, during my 20s, I did have some altercations. And
as I think most of us did.
Yeah, which shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And they were probably all 100% ego-driven. You know, somebody putting it up to you.
Yeah.
And you're saying, okay, you've got this opinion of me, I'm going to change it for you. And I was very lucky that there were no real incidents there. I was a 20-year-old army guy, you know, used to play a good bit of rugby. I was bigger then, I was lifting weights and whatnot, and so somebody sort of slighting me, I would take it seriously. But you are right. The idea of just walking away or running if you have to.
It's underrated.
You know, it's underrated, but sometimes, as everybody out there knows, it's very hard. You have to be the better person, and just allow those juices just to go. I mean, if someone like Jocko is saying that he's going to walk or run away, okay, buddy, no problem.
Yeah.
And like, and this guy is a man mountain. This guy will just absolutely
murder you with one hand.
Murder you, wrap you up like a pretzel.
Probably not think about it.
And you, as the
Definitely
point,
go to sleep that
but the
night,
point that you're making as well is you don't know what somebody else is doing. You don't know that guy could be a phenomenal boxer. That guy could be a phenomenal
100%.
Like taekwondo guy. It was interesting because there was a video footage from last year doing the rounds. Some undesirable characters, I think, attacked or had an altercation with some workers in a cafe or a restaurant on South William Street. And I think they may have harassed one of the female workers, and then 2 or 3 of the male waiters came out and they followed them out. Now, one of the guys picked up a stool to kind of throw at these guys. But one of the other guys who was doing the rounds did a spinning back kick and just nearly sliced the guy's head, he was literally within an inch. And you would look at this guy and go, no, not a threat whatsoever.
Yeah.
But then you see him getting such precision and being able to, hit you with his heel against your temple.
Yeah.
That's scary. So as you kind of, so I think that's an important thing, just to kind of stay level, stay cool, and avoid it all costs.
That is one thing that you kind of learn from martial arts in general. Like, if you're competing, when I first started out, one of the things that was pointed out to me was like, you're going too fast, you're trying to use brute strength, and you're not conserving any energy, or, you're not breathing properly. So, by the middle of the round, I'm heaving and huffing, and I can barely breathe. But one of the things I've learned now is, I don't want to say take your time, but I'm not trying to murder.
You're not in a rush.
Right away, yeah, I'm not in a rush.
Yeah,
and it's just kind of everything is cool. If you look at the high level folks, like they might be moving quickly and fast, but they're cool, they're calm, they're not jittery, they're not all over the place.
But that's one of the big things you kind of notice, generally speaking. Like, I'm not going to reveal my age now, but I'm probably halfway there. Okay, I'm closer to halfway there than a quarter. And when young 18, 19, 20-year-old like white belts start, man, they'll cause you trouble.
Yeah.
Because they are just athletic, they're strong, they've got lungs. And you might have some GAA player who comes along and like this guy can, probably is probably more of an athlete than you are. And has that sort of mental mentality. I'm going to prove my point here. But that's where the sort of just wrapping somebody up, like looking at the clock, saying we've got 5 minutes here, we're a minute and a half in, I've got him wrapped up. Just contain him like a snake for a couple of minutes, wear him out. Yeah. And that's what they used to say, that the real power of jiu-jitsu is. I mean, if you were to look at any of the Gracie breakdowns, that's what they say. Is they say a lot of it is actually containing someone for a period of time, allowing them to expend their energy. And then going forward. But then, interestingly, then you kind of wonder, because
that's one thing I've kind of picked up, from my my Instagram degree that I have.
Everyone has them, yeah.
And just letting them, blow themselves out.
100%.
As rather than me try to overpower them or whatever, then I'm there just waiting for them to be spent.
The problem I've had before, I remember like entering competitions as a white belt and being like, okay, I got to prove myself now and whatnot, and then somebody coming out and just going hell for leather, and then I have to respond in turn, and then I'm at the side going, my lungs are out. Yeah. I want to get sick. I'm really, how am I going to get? I got a 5 minute break between the next one. But I also have to remember the other guy is probably in the same situation, and particularly if you're competing at Masters, I think that's where I think hopefully some older guys have cooler heads and just let it settle. But yeah, I mean, the way I see it is I'm in this for the long haul. Like there's guys out there who will get their black belt after 8, 10, 12 years.
Those guys are freaks though.
Yeah, 100%, and they're at it. Yeah. In my head, it's like, slow and steady. The tortoise in the race. And most of the guys, they actually say, this is an interesting one. They're talking about, you always hear, well, the greatest belt you can get is white belt because you've taken the first step.
100%. I agree with that.
But they actually say that when you look at the dropout rate, it's actually white to blue belt, which is the biggest dropout rate.
Okay.
So that actually, if you do hang on in, I mean, we're looking, I don't know if the audience can see it now, but you've got white belt, blue belt, purple. It's that white to blue belt that most people, and I mean, how many white belts do you know how many of your Wim to Warrior crew stayed on?
I think there were like 30 of us in there, 25, 30, and that I can think of offhand, maybe 5 of them.
Yeah, but those 5 are probably really into it now.
I mean, there's one blue belt out of the pair, or out of that group, and then there's a couple others that have been consistently consistent, or like on and off.
Yeah,
they haven't totally given up on it, but they're kind of on.
Yeah, they're hanging on.
Yeah,
Klingons. Yeah. That's not bad, because once they're there, I suppose you can always dip in and out. It's easier. It's actually harder to come back. What do they say? It's something along the lines of it's harder to restart when you stop.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because like you're dealing with the different kind, like the same kind of emotions of joining when you're brand new again.
100%.
You have this experience that you're supposed to already have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can certainly be intimidating.
Well, I know sometimes, even our coach Gustavo, when I arrive in, if he hasn't seen me for a few weeks, there's like this mad round of applause sort of moment. Who's this guy? Where is he from? And then what will happen is I'll be like, Gustavo, I'm after hiring somebody else. No, I've got time this time. I'm here 3 days a week, no problem. Business picks up. I was like, who's Gustavo? I forgot who he is. So yeah, it's probably the same challenge that most working guys and girls face. The 20-year-old guy who's doing nothing else and wants to be an MMA fighter, he's got the time and the energy and the luxury. But if you've got people who've got commitments, they've got family, they've got other things that they need to be doing, the fact that they can make the time to do it, that to me is actually more inspiring than, for example, a pro athlete.
Yeah, no, I hear that, and I would certainly agree, because these young kids, dare I say, who don't understand, they have literally all the time in the world.
100%.
And
but the interesting thing about that is, if you were to look at MMA compared to a lot of other sports, like if you want to be a professional soccer, American football player, baseball player, basketball player, generally speaking,
you have to start very young.
You start very young, and not only that, but by the time you get to 18 or 19, the writing's on the wall.
Yeah,
like somebody's going to tell you, someone's going to intervene and go, you haven't made it, you haven't made the draft, you're not getting into an academy or whatnot.
Yeah.
Whereas the interesting thing with MMA is you can continue, you can be a pro MMA fighter, like you can do it full time, and nobody's going to stop you from doing it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. No one's going to pull you inside and say, no, your coach might say, look, maybe it's time you consider other options. Yeah. But if you want to, you could spend your from 18 to 26 just doing this. And it's it's kind of a romantic lifestyle, training twice a day, you're in with a crew there, you're mixing it, with elite fighters and whatnot. It can be quite, I'm sure, intoxicating. But for a lot of these guys, from what I've seen, even in my 10 years, I've seen some of these guys who've started and they've said, I'm going to make the UFC. And then they end up making KFC, which is unfortunate. So I'd always say to people, be realistic.
I think things are kind of changing, because like our 30s aren't the same as our 30s for like our parents,
100%.
And then I know, like for women, just because women in general tend to start this a lot later in life, so like you could start training in your late 20s, as a woman, and then be a pro into your 40s.
Oh yeah.
Whereas like for a man, that's a little unfeasible.
Yeah.
But even for men, I think that's changing a bit.
Yeah. Well, even now, mid-late 30s, you look at, as soon as a dude is nearly touching 40.
Yeah, that is kind of retirement.
That's kind of it. But it's just...
But even in general, though, you have there's only so many beatings to the head you can take.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's interesting because a lot of the public who, when they see MMA, they have a particular perception of it and think it's just gory, mindless violence. But in many respects, it's actually safer than a lot of other sports out there. At the same time, you're coming from the United States and you look at American football. That's just one where, in fact, if they had less protective gear, the sport would have to evolve to make it safer. Because the next thing down is something like rugby. Now, they're already talking about concussion and rugby and whatnot. But yeah, it does happen. And that is sad when it happens, because people... that might be the only thing they have to rely upon. And even we were speaking about it separately before, about retired UFC fighters now going into bare knuckle boxing.
Yeah.
And that's taking off. And I just finished a book by It was about a bare knuckle boxing champion. Gormley was his name. He was basically king of the gypsies, king of the travellers. And this was back in the day, but now it's really taken off. I mean, you know,
was it the BKFC bare knuckle fight championship?
Yeah.
Look, I used to be like I told you, I used to be an advocate for no gloves in UFC.
Yeah.
But kind of after watching that, I'm like, it's probably not a terrible idea.
It'd be interesting to see, because if there were no gloves, you know, I'd love to see what a bare knuckle MMA fight how it would pan out, particularly not just at the very first one, but if it evolved a little bit, to see what it would look like, because a lot of these guys will probably say, listen, I don't want to take damage to the head.
Yeah.
Like, would there be more on the ground? But then when it's on the ground, once it gets on the ground, then it's fists. Yeah. You know, that's quite devastating.
But like being on the ground with no gloves, it'd be a lot easier to maneuver your hands around. I always found that to be a challenge, especially because, you know, we had to use like the sparring gloves.
Yeah.
You know, so those are a lot thicker. But
you could probably get away with it by calling it, you know, no-gi striking or something like that.
You know what I have seen and I like is what do they call that? It's like combat jiu-jitsu.
Oh yeah, when you have a snap.
It's like the kind of the
and you
open
know,
hand.
The great thing about
cool.
that,
I like that.
The great thing about that is it adds a degree of realism into your training.
Absolutely.
And I actually think that in general, in an ideal world, nearly every BJJ practitioner would, a class a week or a month, practice it a little bit, just to give you a sense. Now, again, I've got very good friends of mine. I
want to do it with knives.
Yeah, I was going to say Alan and Ferris, they're probably out there, and they're just BJJ purists, and they're like, it's sport jiu-jitsu. But, and one of them was even talking about, because he's now training in a gym in Berlin. He was in RGA, which is kind of like my local gym in Dublin 15, but he was in RGA, and now he's in Berlin. He was saying he was thinking about doing a striking class on a Sunday. And he's like, but what's the point? And I was kind of like in my head, to be able to fight. But then his perception was, well, it's not going to add anything to my ground game. And he's more like a grappler, so that's the main thing for him. So I can get it. It really depends where you're coming from. So, you know, it really depends what your motivation is. But whatever it is, you know, if you're a striker, if you're doing jiu-jitsu, if you're doing a combination, like, we're hobbyists.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also want to be doing this, if I can, when I'm 60 years of age. I'd love to be 70. I'd love to be 70, yeah.
There's a woman I follow on Instagram, and I forget her handle, but I think she just got a black belt, and she's like in her black or brown belt, and she's in her 70s. Oh, yeah.
My dad is 72. He's your typical Irishman, drinking and smoking all of his life. I sometimes joke and say he's like a cockroach. He never gets sick. If there was a nuclear strike tomorrow, he'd come crawling out of somewhere. He's just this indestructible type of character. Doesn't look pristine, but he's like still physically working. He's still doing manual labor. If he can do it with the damage he's put his body through,
anyone can.
I can certainly make it, yeah.
All right, so here, look, it was great having you in.
No, it's great to be here.
I sincerely enjoyed our chat. Like, I could talk about this all day.
Yeah.
I love this type of conversation in general, really.
Well, as I said, you're here at Locomotiva BJJ. You are welcome to come to Crushell Co. Law at Work, our offices.
Yeah, I did want to hit on that real quick. So
of course.
So you're a solicitor?
So I'm a solicitor, yeah. So I'm a solicitor. All I do is employment law, nothing else.
Did you do anything before?
Before that, I actually started life as a funds lawyer at one point. Okay. So funds is like, you know, your sort of Wall Street lawyers, to be quite honest. These guys make...
Are you the one who kept him out of jail?
I would if I could, if he was my client. But no, what happened was I did that for the first year. I was quite attracted to... I got a job offer when I qualified with another US law firm who had an office here in Ireland. And I was quite attracted to, that space, the idea of being the corporate lawyer, nice suits, you know, the shiny glass office and whatnot. But I quickly came to realize that wasn't the picture I had of myself when I was growing up. Yeah. You know, I had this image of what I wanted. When I wanted to be a lawyer, I had an image of the type of lawyer I wanted to be, and that was mixing with people, solving their problems. And it sounds corny, but actually making a difference. Now,
certainly in employment law, you'd definitely be able to find that.
Well, look at one of the good things about employment law is this. I'm not doing criminal law because I don't want to be spending my day with criminals. I'm not going to lie to you, okay?
They're not all criminals, isn't it? Innocent
Some of
proven
them
guilty.
Well,
sir?
listen, I was best man for one of my good friends who was a very well-known criminal barrister. He wrote the book on non-fatal offences against a person. I'm not too sure if he'd share your assumption that most of his clients are actually innocent. But anyway, I didn't want to be spending my day with criminals. And also, I didn't want to be spending my day with suits.
Yeah.
I wanted to meet somewhere in the middle. And with employment law, the best thing about it is at least your clients have a job. So there is some barrier because you got to get paid. So I started my practice about 2.5 years ago. It's all I do. I really enjoy it. And one of the great things about it is I've been really lucky that I could build a profile quite quickly.
Yeah.
And become a specialist in a very particular area. I started my doctorate at the same time. It's a doctorate looking at the criteria necessary to bring a successful case in employment law. Generally looking at what is the identifying features of winner and loser cases so that we can accentuate one and avoid the other. And I thought to myself, it'll take me 4 or 5 years to get busy. And by that stage, I'll have my doctorate done. But it was like, after 3 months, it was just all go. And that's been very fortunate. But now, it's just been great because there's some really great cases that I get to work on, some really interesting stuff. When you come home at the end of the day and you can turn, to your partner and say, wait till I tell you about this.
Yeah.
You could never do that generally in corporate law. Wait till I tell you about the share purchase agreement that I drafted today. Whereas some of my cases are interesting. Very interesting case that I started and that finished through a different practice was I started a case recently, about 2 or 3 years ago, in my old law firm. 11 drivers who were being terminated. They were working for Guinness.
Okay.
They were actually subcontractors for a different outfit. So they were working for a company who were dropping off kegs to pubs. There was a particular pub in the north side of Dublin, inner city, that didn't have any relationship with Guinness, but also had Guinness on tap.
Interesting, okay.
And what was happening was Guinness filmed these delivery drivers making an extra stop and dropping off kegs to this location. Now, one would assume they were kegs of Guinness, but they couldn't prove it.
Okay.
And there would have been a degree of keg swapping where somebody might have had too much Heineken or too much Carlsberg and they'd swap them over. So that's obviously what was happening in this case. So those 11 drivers, we filed their complaint and everybody thought it was a foregone conclusion. No, come on, man. These guys have lost. We know what's happening here. I attended their disciplinary meeting. I attended their appeal and then I moved on from that law firm. But the other day, all of them got a settlement. They got a compensation of between 2,000 to 10,000 each. Total award of about 110,000 because the company didn't follow proper processes.
Are these processes that the company would set up for themselves? Or
Well, generally
there's
they're legal industry standards like that. You have to investigate it. You have to give them an opportunity to respond. That there has to be an independent appeal and things like this.
So it's not even that necessarily they did. Not even necessarily that they guilty or not guilty of what they were being.
100%.
It's that the company did not follow their own procedures or legal procedures.
And that's an interesting one because when clients come to me, very often they want to pour their heart out. And I'm like, I don't need 90% of what you're telling me. Yeah, it'll be relevant. We'll put it somewhere in the submission.
Yeah.
I need to know, were you invited to an investigation meeting? Was it independent? Could you cross-examine people? Was it put to you in writing? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm not trying to get people off on a technicality, but generally employment law is there to protect the most vulnerable people in society. It's there to protect the people who are making your breakfast roll. It's there to,
yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, probably most of the people who even know about employment law probably are the. Well, no, is it kind of the everyday person that would know to contact you?
Well, this is very interesting. This is an interesting one, and if I'm being honest, generally speaking, what I've seen through my own research in my doctorate is that, I only got this figure this morning. So we divided the people bringing claims to the Workplace Relations Commission, which is kind of like an informal court for employment law disputes. We divided them into, I think it was 5 or 6 social categories, from A, which would be upper middle class, I think it was down to C or D. And that sounds terrible. We really based it on what was their salary. And out of the complainants, only 1.5% were upper middle class.
Really?
And the majority were from lower socioeconomic backgrounds.
Do you think it's because maybe there's easier transition?
Well, the reason being is, I guarantee you that the people who had the resources to bring a claim.
And then that's when, I mean, another assumption, they probably have money saved up.
Well, not only that, they have money saved up, but also they can hire good lawyers.
Yeah.
They know the system. They have the social, and cultural capital to know how to not say game the system, but work the system.
Yeah.
They can get a lawyer very early on in the process once the proverbial hits the fan. And then someone like me intervenes, and then they get a settlement agreement. And we're in the process now of reviewing, and I've reviewed or drafted or negotiated hundreds, if not thousands, of settlement agreements over the last 2.5, 3 years.
Wow.
And the vast majority of them are people who are middle class and above, because if somebody gets fired, someone's a cashier in Tesco or they're making chicken fillet rolls in Centra, maybe their employer doesn't fear the consequences of not following processes and procedures for them as much as they will a VP or a director of operations. Absolutely. So that's what we found. And the unfortunate thing is that, we try to provide as much assistance as we can. The only case that we take on, I'm not saying a pro bono basis, but a deferred payment basis, are pregnancy-related dismissals, because I'm like, that is the most vulnerable person in society. Everybody else, we try to help. So people come to us, but we get dozens of inquiries a day. And so you kind of have to weed them out. But I was told the other day that I was taking advantage of people by charging a consultation fee. But I kind of revert back, hey, if you go to a barber, if you go to get your car serviced, if you go to get anything done, the person there is going to charge you,
But to be honest, it's fair enough, because I mean, you might have some folks who make an appointment and not show up.
And that's what happens a lot.
That probably happened quite a bit.
And I'll tell you where that happened to me most.
If anything, it's just, you're kind of guaranteeing.
Where that happened to me most was actually when I was providing free legal advice in free legal aid centres. And, people just don't know the value. When something's for free, they don't know the value.
Yeah, exactly.
But so if anybody does need any legal advice, crushell.ie.
I'll link everything.
Yeah, but the point I was originally making is, you're more than welcome. We've got a nice new office down in Smithfield. I've got 2 very grandiose green leather chairs, a beautiful gold painting backdrop. So the next time, hopefully, although I know Edson, great guy, let's level up the podcast and get it done.
All right, hey, I'm happy to do that. Season 2.
Season 2. Yeah. That's when we have. That's when Joe Rogan comes to get interviewed.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, cool.
But all right, look, it was fantastic talking to you.
My pleasure.
I sincerely appreciate you coming in.
No.
We'll have to do this again. I want to talk about this book you're writing.
Yeah.
So
cool.
All right, everyone.
Thank you for your time.
Yep. Check out BJJ Locomotiva. And I know we went on a lot about SPG, but the head coach here, Edson, is a brown belt out of SPG, so you're getting a good education here.
He's a good guy as well.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's a good friend of mine, and I highly recommend this place. I come here often, so check it out. Follow me at the Michigan Mauler, and then you can follow Barry here.
Barry James Paul on Instagram, or else you'll just find at Barry Crushell on other more professional social media sites.
All right, perfect. And do you have an Instagram for your law firm?
Oh, it's Crushell Law, Crushell Crushell Law.
Perfect. I'll throw everything down below. But all right, great.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good one,
Thank you very much. Cool.
Go, 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 go.